Aaron Shwom, welcome to the Preconstruction podcast.
Gareth, it's nice to be back again. It's been a little while.
It has been a while. Always nice to catch up with you, but specifically this time we're going to dig deep into delivery methods, which I am really looking forward to. But just in case someone didn't listen to the first episode and anybody that doesn't know you, give us a quick idea where you're at now and what you're doing.
Thanks for the opportunity. I am currently the director of pre-construction at a company called Chapman Construction and Design, based out of Newton, Massachusetts. Their director of pre-construction. We work on projects for the defense, healthcare, nonprofits, and sort of sustainably focused clients. Mostly renovations to existing spaces. We'll do some small scale new construction projects as well as standalone new construction projects as well. It's a company that's been around for about 40 years, a family-owned company. Jack Hall took the company over from his father, John Hall, a few years ago. It's about an 85 to 90 person company. We've got a nice niche market in these hard to enter markets like defense and healthcare, which is great. We work directly for a lot of our clients, and we're not doing much developer work.
Brilliant. And I love that statement at the end. You work directly with the clients, and we're going to get into that in great detail, why that's important and how you can kind of craft a delivery method to each project and why you would craft each or why you would use each delivery method. Looking forward to that. But before we do that, let's jump back a little bit. Was it always construction for you, Aaron?
Was it always? It was in my heart, I'd say. It took me until I was about 25, 24, 25 to really, stand up to my folks and say, this is the path I want to take. And I started my way into a custom cabinet shop and a millwork shop based in the northern part of Massachusetts. I just fell in love with working in my hands again, learning how to build things, learning how the sort of manufacturing process of how, a project comes in, how you order material, and then you're building things. And I sort of took that piecemeal, breaking a job into parts and pieces and brought it to commercial construction. I moved over to worked at a couple of large firms, John Moriarty and Associates, and Consigli Construction as well in Boston. And for some reason, I was able to really understand commercial construction, starting from doing quantity takeoffs and estimating. And in the last 8 or 10 years, I've covered most of what pre-construction covers, all the way from business development to signing a final client contract. And I take that knowledge now and bring it to Chapman Construction as a kind of layer above all the normal processes that we're using. What's interesting about Chapman is that we have a model where it's pretty old school. Our project executives and project managers also do budget and estimating as well as running the job. So there's continuity through the job, which is kind of an old school mentality. We think it's a differentiator for us. And so where I stand is I stand kind of a layer above, looking across all the different divisions and making sure that there's consistency across them, whether it's in our proposal letters, how we're presenting information, how we're presenting value engineering. I'm sort of the layer above all of those processes in support of the project teams.
Brilliant. And is the PX across a multiple projects as well? And then the PM runs the project?
Yes, PXs are effectively, there's four teams here, and each PX has a sector in which they work. So there's sort of a defense PX, there's a higher education PX, and they'll have a series of senior project managers, PMs, APMs, project assistants that will help them run multiple projects. I'd say each PX is probably running anywhere from 10 to 15 jobs. Each senior PM is probably running 5 to 6 jobs, and APMs, yeah, they've got a pretty big workload. The size of the projects vary and range from, for best book clients, of $5,000 to much larger. The largest project we'll probably do is 15 to 20 or $25 million projects, so, and everything in between.
Brilliant. But again, I mean, it sounds a lot, 15 projects, but if it's within a discipline that you know inside out, then it should be manageable. It's an interesting model. Yeah, I like it. And then you sit
Yes.
above that then, and so how involved do they get early on when you're talking about schematic, conceptual estimates or dealing with the client directly, the PXs? Do they just come in and kind of oversee and have a look at what you're doing and then take it on once it
A
comes
lot of, well, actually, a lot of times they're bringing the leads in themselves. So I'm supporting them. So they get involved immediately with the project. And depending on whether it's what I call a bread and butter project, which is in our wheelhouse, I sort of let the PX teams do their thing, stay out of the way. Again, I'm just sort of a higher level view of managing risk overall in the economy. Like conversation came up about tariffs. Someone needed to think about what kind of language we needed to put into our proposals to protect ourselves from and our clients from potential tariffs that are coming out. And then there are select projects in which Chapman doesn't necessarily, Chapman has capabilities, but is looking to expand. I rely a lot on my high-rise construction background from those two larger companies to help teach and educate the team on complicated site work projects or landscaping or structural steel, just things that folks at this company don't have a lot of exposure to. They're very good. We're really, really good at all the interior pieces and complicated mechanical systems. That's not a problem. It's just kind of giving that lens of having worked at a larger company, having worked on multiple high profile projects. What are all the little things that can really stop you from getting started?
Yeah, I love it. The go no go strategy, as you say, but in your experience with both those companies, and then does that lead to? Because I want to talk to you about this certificate from MIT
Yeah.
back in 2018. Was that how important was that to take, and what did you get from it? And give us a little idea of what it was.
Yeah. So in 2018, I decided to do and was supported by when I was working at John Moriarty, supported by them to go and take a 2 week intensive at MIT's executive education program. I did a program on real estate development and finance. We took a course on basic finance, pulling a pro forma together. We did case studies on business development deals. It was a combination of folks from multiple countries. I was probably one of the only construction folks in the coursework. There were a lot of folks who maybe worked at small to mid-level banks. There were folks who were doing foreign investment and trying to figure out how they can bring their money into the United States. And the course was actually taught by a lot of Boston Properties folks who are actually alumni of the MIT real estate program. It gave me a really solid base, especially when I was working in the developer work, for understanding the life cycle of projects, the due diligence, the acquisition, the capital stack and financing. And, construction is usually the largest part, the largest number in that pro forma. Um, but it is just one line on the pro forma. And there's a lot of visibility we wanted to see in terms of how they're bringing in money, how they're funding it, whether it's equity that they're putting to the deal, when they have to get the construction loan, when did they buy the land. It just gave a really nice overview of the entire process. Whereas construction is a big part of the process, but on a big development deal like I've worked on previously, it could be a 6 to 8 year process from when they first decide that they're going to enter a particular market. They're going to look at a piece of land. You do a year and a half of pre-con. You do a 3 year build. Then you're leasing for a year. Then you're not fully stabilized for another 3 or 4. And getting that context from the coursework was really, really important to understanding where I felt and where we felt we fit into the overall process.
Brilliant. And when you were taking that, I mean, that obviously gave you massive confidence when you were going and doing your conceptual, your pre-construction management responsibilities.
Yeah.
Within that, did they touch on that on the course, or was it more high level?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Say it
So
again.
during the course at MIT, did they talk about the importance of pre-construction within the life cycle of a project, or was it more high level?
They spoke really high level about pre-construction. They barely mentioned it at all. They were they were very focused on trying to help us understand the finance piece of it and how you get money and how you can put it to work. But there was very little talk about pre-construction. You and I have talked about this a lot of times. I'm sure a lot of folks in this community feel like pre-construction is a really undervalued tool to be used across multiple construction types for sure. Yeah, it was pretty much glanced over. We were one line in a budget. They spoke, yeah, you work with a construction manager, they help you build a schedule, you put it in your pro forma, and you kind of moved on with your life. There wasn't much discussion about construction.
Good. And another one before we leave on this, would you recommend it? Because I get senior estimators, pre-con managers contacting me all the time and looking to upskill and get certificates and basically get ahead of the game. Would you recommend something like that?
I definitely would recommend it for someone like that, for someone who's in estimating. It just gives you a wider view and a context for which you're operating. I think it also helps inform how you speak to clients and understand what they're worried about. What are the things that they're worried about? I mean, we're currently in an environment in Boston where we have, relatively high interest rates. We have high land valuations. Rents have started to stabilize or decrease, and construction costs are quite high. So understanding and just knowing that there are really four or five major factors as to whether a development happens or construction happens, for that matter, any construction happens, gives you context to understand why not much has been happening in the past 6 or 12 months in development in terms of shovels in the ground, but why there's been a ton of work, why there's been a lot of pre-construction to try to figure out where we are in this cycle and what factors have to change in order for construction to work. Whether it's the healthcare client who owns all their own buildings and they're trying to branch out or consolidate their doctors and figuring out where they're putting people, construction costs are very important to them. For developers, it's what's the land value basis, what's the construction cost, obviously, and what's happening with rents. Are rents decreasing? And the other piece too is that they have projects that are potentially in construction in their portfolio, in which there are different expectations now for what rent currently is compared to what they projected in their portfolio in those pro formas. So all of that information and all of that context was given by taking this course, and it certainly informs certainly deforms our decision making. I mean, here at Chapman, there's a reason that we focus on healthcare, defense, and nonprofit and sustainability work. We used to be a commercial interiors company almost exclusively. And as we've seen, the commercial market has changed significantly. So Jack Hall made a strategic plan about 5 years ago that said we need to pivot more into defense and healthcare industries, which again are more sort of recession prone. There are harder barriers to entry. They're sort of higher profit type work. And so again, all of that was informed by having the context of all that real estate coursework that I took, which was, part of me said, I want to make sure that I'm pivoting and moving to a place that can use the pre-construction skills that I have, but is also in really stable sectors, as we've weathered this last year and a half or two in Boston.
Brilliant, great context. I mean, obviously, huge pivot from Chapman. That is not easy. I mean, there'll be companies listening to this and estimators and pre-con folks saying we've been trying to get into a different market for 2 decades, and we just can't seem to penetrate it. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of specialism, and a lot of grit. So, fair play to everyone at Chapman. So, talk to me now. Part of that conundrum that you talked about is what delivery method to use for each project. It's an
Mhm.
ongoing story when you talk about project delivery. What's the right project delivery method? Um, Give us a high level idea of the common delivery methods first, and then we'll dive into each one.
Sure. So there's really three delivery methods that I've seen are most common. There's the design, bid, build, in which the owner hires a design team. They go through the entirety of the design. Once the construction documents are complete, they then send it out for bid to either bring a construction manager slash GC onto the project. They award it to the lowest bidder, lowest qualified bidder, and then you build it. So there's very little, if any, CM involvement during design. You're just getting a number. That's kind of the oldest method. There's design build, which a lot of people are using these days. It's a bit murky as to what they mean, but design build in its traditional sense is previously the owner has a direct contract with the design team and their consultants, and separately has a direct contract with the construction manager. There is no contractual relationship between the design team and the construction manager. What design build does is it puts the construction manager on top of the design team. So the owner, design builder, or construction manager, and then the design team and its consultants below. And it changes the contractual relationship between those entities where we, Chapman, are now responsible for the architecture and engineering on a project. And the last option is pre-construction. Pre-construction, we've talked many times, Gareth, a lot of people have a different definition of what pre-construction is. Um, Pre-construction sort of lives in between. It's really a part of design, bid, build, where the pre-construction partner is brought on maybe at the conceptual level or the schematic design level or the design development level. So they're brought in halfway through design. They still are contracted directly to the owner, so they do not have a contractual relationship with the architect or the design team. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to bring involvement with the construction manager as you're finishing design. So it's a sort of hybrid in between. Those are
Very.
probably the three. Those are probably the three largest, the three most common methods that I've seen in my experience.
And in your opinion, your professional opinion, having worked with John Moriarty, Consigli, and now Chapman, and I know it's probably too much of a vague question, which is the best delivery method? And you're probably going to pivot to say that it depends on the project.
Depends on the project. They took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I think what's important for what I want folks to understand, whether the audience here is other pre-construction managers, estimators, or whether it's potential clients, is what are the priorities of the job? Usually it's schedule. How quickly can we get from now into having to being at certificate of occupancy? Cost is important. So those are the two priorities that a lot of people talk about. The other thing is the other factors that affect that question. You're asking a simple question, but it has a complex answer, and it ties in nicely as project complexity. Are the projects simple? Are they relatively straightforward scope? It's, a straightforward office fit out in an existing building in a clean space, or are they complex? Meaning, are they are the logistics tied to the design somehow? Is there a phasing plan that needs to happen? Are the means and methods and design interwoven together? Are there lead time issues that we have to consider? And then the last piece of a priority, so you've got your two priorities, schedule and cost, you have project complexity. And the last piece is really the capability of your internal resources as an owner. Do you have project managers on staff who can project manage a project? Or are you hiring an owner's project manager? Or are you a nonprofit who would like to have a project manager but can't afford it? So you're really relying on the construction manager to be that partner. And I think what would be valuable for us is to talk about some of these scenarios in which design build makes sense, in which a full pre-construction makes sense, and when design bid build makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think we should do that because if you, the people that I'm speaking to, like yourself, Aaron, they started out in the heavy build bid area. So it was competitive. It was a number. You got to be low. Then it became very much negotiated over the last decade and a half. It was negotiated. You were involved with the client early on. It was repeat business. It was fantastic. But we're seeing design build now come to the fore, really. Um, let's take design build first. Let's go over that. When's it the best to use design build, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's important to use design build when you, as an organization or your owner, does not have a lot of project managed experience and the project is complex. I'll give you a perfect example. We have a YMCA that we're trying to help renovate up in New Hampshire. We also have a New Hampshire office. And they know exactly what their program wants to be. They want to refresh their space. They have an operating summer camp that we're going to, it operates, all their services run year round. So there's a phasing and logistical component to it. We're removing windows. We're doing a lot of things in different parts of the building. It is a complex project. The means and methods of building it, right? The phasing is tied to how they design, and it's tied to when things need to be delivered. So in that situation, the client said, we want to do design build. It makes sense as so much is related to logistics and construction that the construction manager manage the design team, and engineers. And oh, by the way, we as a YMCA, we don't have the bandwidth or the money to project manage or hire an OPM.
So
So
I'm gonna stop you there, right? Because this is a problem that I'm seeing with companies of your size and a little bit bigger. They are traditionally negotiated. They bring in projects. They are now getting design build projects, and the bandwidth, the time, the resources
yeah,
spent on design build, they're basically saying they're reaching out to me and going, "Listen, I need a design build director to run these projects. It's
yes.
absorbing all of my pre-construction folks." Like that's a big problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we have certain metrics of how we look at jobs and, where we need to be to operate as an efficient company. And you're totally right. The metrics for pre-construction are the metrics for pre-construction or managing design are different than just going and building a job. And so for a company like ours, yes, what happens is it does take project managers and it does take project executives away from working on projects that are in the field and getting them to spend time on design. But that's part of where I come and step in and help. I sort of help lead those. I can help lead those design meetings. I can help them understand what the process are, help them pull the proposals in from the architects and the consultants and sort all the contractual relationships out. That's really where I come in, but it is definitely a test on our resources. And a lot of times what makes it even more complicated, Gareth, is people want to use it in a scenario we think it's entirely unnecessary to do. And so on the one hand, you want to be a good, you want to be a good provider for your clients. But on the other hand, you want to say, hey, this, it would be much simpler and we could provide you a great level of service if you just went back to design, build, build. You don't need us to design this.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good. I mean, obviously, you need experience in all four or five
yeah.
delivery to be able to give that advice. And do they take that well? I mean, do they understand once you explain it? Because at the end of the day, it's probably saving them money as well if it's design bid build. If it's not necessary.
I think so. It is hard to convince people. Another point I really want to talk about, I know we're wandering a little bit, is I think where people come from saying they want design build, I think what they're really saying is they want some more control over the architect.
Okay.
They want another level, they want another set of eyes over over the architect.
Okay.
Um, and it doesn't really, whether you use design build, yes, design build, we can definitely manage that for you as as a design build project. But it may not entirely be necessary. You still have to make decisions. You still have to tell the architect what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Again, it's sort of this complicated thing. So what we're trying to educate folks on is what are your priorities? And again, you're right. A lot of our work is negotiated. I'd say 70% of our portfolio is negotiated and 30% is bid. Um, we're lucky enough to be able to have those conversations early on with them. There is a little bit of resistance because usually what's happened is the specific project manager or the specific facilities manager has had some negative experience with another delivery method, and they've heard that design build will help solve all their problems, right?
There's no silver bullet, Aaron. We know that it
Exactly.
doesn't happen. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's in a nutshell what design build is. Again, another place is if you just have like a really simple project where there isn't much documentation or design that's happening. We had a client who said, "Hey, went through the walkthrough and said, we want you to match all the finishes from this side of the building to this side of the building. We have no specs. We don't really care that much about what we're documenting. We just need enough documentation to get a permit."
Okay.
And we need to have a little bit of documentation from HVAC and from fire alarm and plumbing. You know, can you guys handle the design of those couple of small things?
Is that
Design.
like a breath of fresh air when you hear that, Aaron?
It is a breath of fresh air. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we produce the drawings. We get a design team involved. It happens very quickly. The projects are usually not complex. They're relatively short. And then sometimes you can hire a subcontractor who has design capabilities, and even that's easier. But again, those are sort of the two scenarios that I would use. Simple project, not a lot of documentation, or a complex project where you can't afford to or you don't have a lot of project management experience. That's when I would use design build.
Yeah. And the complexities, I mean, we know from projects coming out now, it doesn't matter what sector, what industry, the cost of these buildings and the schedule, they're both blooming out. And maybe that's why design build is becoming more popular. Is there any examples of that within defense, within healthcare, of design build really coming to the fore and working well?
These industries actually aren't actually great for design builds. The reason is, defense contracts. A lot of them, we have master agreements with them on the construction side, and they have master agreements with the architects. They actually some of these companies are structured in such a way in which we're not actually allowed to do design build.
Interesting.
And in the healthcare industry, and we'll talk about it in a second, actually is a great lead into pre-construction. Those projects, a lot of times, you really want a solid pre-construction program as opposed to design build. And the reason is if you have a campus or a series of campuses for your hospitals, you want consistency in design and engineering. So it makes more sense in those scenarios to be doing a typical design method using the design team underneath the owner.
Okay.
It may make sense to bring a pre-construction partner in for pre-construction because there are lead times on equipment, there are lead times on HVAC. But it's important that the contractual relationship stay between the architect and the owner for continuity across the portfolio of a particular company.
Interesting. Interesting. And that's more successful in healthcare.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pre-construction is definitely much more successful, especially when, we have to, we need to add we need to add 20 beds over to this location. It needs to be on in Q2. We have, HVAC equipment, rooftop units that we have to change. Those have, 10 to 12 to 16 week lead times. We need someone who can manage the pre-purchase of these things, as well as manage the construction costs, because we then have to go and ask for money from our capital expenditures department as well. These industries that we tend to work in a lot are, build a preliminary budget, stop. We need to go ask somebody to get this project funded, whether it's the federal government, whether it's a private contractor, or whether it's your healthcare sort of corporate structure. They come back and say, yes, this project can be funded, and then you sort of move forward. So they need both certainty of schedule and cost early, and the projects are complex. But a lot of these defense and healthcare institutions have project managers.
Mm-hmm.
So this segues perfectly into when to use pre-construction and when to bring someone in. Projects that are complex, but sophisticated clients who have project management staff, and I think pre-construction is the right way to go.
Brilliant.
And bring us in a little bit earlier, SDs or DDs, to get those baseline budgets set. We'll work with you on lead times. We'll push the schedule. We'll push procurement, and we'll get the job done for you.
Brilliant. And just quickly on those type of projects that you've done, how long is pre-construction services? How long does that last? Is that a year and a half generally?
Now, when I worked for larger companies like Consigli and Moriarty in the developer world, those pre-construction durations would be anywhere from, it could be 9 for a fast track project to 18 months.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, that was different because in the developer world, as compared to the defense or healthcare, in the developer world, they have a series of entitlements that they have to go through. But before they can even do the entitlements, they have to know what the building type is going to cost. You could have a developer come in and say, I'd like you to price this building as an office building. Now I want you to take half of that building and price it as a hotel on top and an office building on the bottom. Now I want you to take the hotel on top and I want you to make it I want you to take the hotel, drop it on the bottom, put condos on the top. Now I want you to put a garage in. Now I want you to take a garage in. Each one of those parts and pieces affects the pro forma, like we were talking about before. So before they can even do their entitlements, before they can even start to go to the city to get a special permit or a zoning variance, they need to have some certainty. So that's why pre-construction makes sense on those complex urban projects.
Now, the $1 million question, Aaron, and this is across all industries. pre-construction services, everyone struggles with getting paid on pre-construction services. Um, there's some figures going about. The people I speak to, you can get paid anywhere between 30% and 70% of the cost of pre-construction services.
Mhm.
Then some build it into the contract moving forward. Some people give it back once they won the project. What's your view on it, and when is it a good idea to get paid for it, and when it's not? Maybe you need skin in the game.
I mean, obviously, we all want to break, the best of all the companies I worked for, the best we think we can do on pre-construction is to break even,
Yeah.
right? It is a service that we provide in service of putting work in the ground, right? So the best we hope for is that we can get paid for it. The answer is it really depends, being in the negotiated markets, having 70% of our portfolio being negotiated, there is a little bit more wiggle room for us to actually ask and get paid for pre-construction services. So it's the bid work in which, you're competing against two or three bidders, fees are dropping, then folks are throwing in FREECon. They're trying to figure out creative ways to get paid back for all the services that they're providing. It really just depends on how competitive an environment is, whether it's bid or negotiated, and also whether you're making an investment in a particular industry. So let's say you're trying to break into more ground up work, or you're trying to break into a new, I don't know, a new sector of somehow manufacturing or whatever it may be. That given how tight the market is, that you're going to have to maybe take a job at cost just to get yourself the experience of doing that. It's all part of the conversations you're having with the PXs. These are all conversations that you're having on developer jobs as well. What's the likelihood that the job's going to go? That's another question too. There's lots of times you do pre-con, you expect to get paid when the GMP happens, but then no GMP happens. So what happens to all those costs?
It's a risky one. It's a topic that comes up all the time. And
Yeah.
there's no right answer. Obviously, it depends on the project and your go no go strategy. You mentioned before that the two fundamentals, or two of the four fundamentals, was cost and schedule. We did a mini series, and if anybody hasn't listened to the pre-construction podcast series on scheduling, it's becoming more and more prevalent in commercial construction. Just probably due to the large numbers involved and the complexity of these projects. What's your view on scheduling, and how important is it at Chapman?
It's really essential. I mean, it especially, you know, our projects durations are significantly shorter than larger work. I mean, we have project durations that could be 3 months to 9 months, as opposed to larger construction projects which have 2 to 4 years. What that also means is that our sales cycle is really short. So it is not uncommon that 4 or 6 months out, we are only at 50% capacity for backlog of work. And that's normal. So schedules are essential to making sure, one, that we can be competitive and that we can, that we can get paid to do the quality work that we do. But number two is, when schedules slip for us, that's a big problem on profitability, but it's also a big problem on feeding the machine. I mean, we could do upwards of 200 to 250 jobs a year, varying in size, and so project schedules are essential. It's usually a differentiator for us in the markets that we're in. Folks aren't necessarily used to the level of details that we provide. Oh, that project's going to be 12 weeks. Well, we tell them why it's going to be 12 and a half weeks because we actually pull those together. Obviously, in the larger scale projects that I've worked in the past, lining up the pre-construction durations, lead times, construction milestones affects the pro forma. It affects when, cash flows are essential on large projects, right? How much are you floating in equity until you get that construction loan? What costs are you committing before you even put a shovel in the ground? One of those commitments being made, because each of those has a separate carrying a cost, which affects the pro forma in those projects. So from our perspective at our company, schedules are essential. It's how we think about whether we want to pursue a job or not, as we think about what's the schedule and how many resources we want to take. And I work very closely with our vice president of construction, whose job is really majority, his job is managing the overall operations. But a big concern is, how are we keeping people busy? How are we getting everyone scheduled? And if a client wants a specific superintendent on a project, how are we 3 or 4 months before rejiggering everything? And it all comes down to consistencies of schedules, not only for the client, but for ourselves more than anything.
Yeah. And then that comes back to the client. We talked about the client. The one thing that the client wants is to save money. And to me, and speaking to people, one person put it perfectly. If you get the pre-construction services that right and you get the scheduling right, then you have a serious chance of saving a lot of money throughout the life cycle of a project.
Yes, you do. You
Yeah.
do. Um, yeah, one of the other pieces of it as well is it does save you money to bring a pre-construction partner on because you can offer extensive value engineering, value management earlier on in the process. But one of the things that it does sometimes in clients, we hear clients is we think you committed too early for certain trades. We think you committed too early to HVAC or you committed too early to electrical, and that represents a large portion of our budget already. And as you commit to those dollars, right, the piece that's left and the amount that you can affect it with VE and design starts to shrink and shrink and shrink. And so one of the jobs of pre-construction, as has always been our job, is to explain that yes, you've locked up the price for X, Y, and Z, but your ability to change the price for those specific trades decreases as you award more trades. So it's definitely this balance, and it depends on the client and it depends on the industry, and it depends on lead times as well. Those are all the things that we try to balance.
Yeah, they're the enemy. Lead times. That's the one that we're all fighting against. Aaron, as always, this has been brilliant. Really, really appreciate your insight into delivery methods and your breakdown as well. It's going to be helpful for the audience. If there is anybody listening to this now saying, you know what, whether it's a client or an estimator or a pre-com manager, saying, I would like to ask Aaron a few more questions about it or anything that we've discussed, where's the best place to get you?
You folks can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, and our website at chap-con.com. You can look it up, Chapman Construction and Design out of Newton, Massachusetts.
Brilliant. And what I'll do, I'll put both your LinkedIn link and the website to Chapman in the show notes below, folks. Aaron, it's been a pleasure. Am I going to see you in San Diego this year, or are you going to make the trip
Uh,
over?
we're talking about it. We're talking about it.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah, no, I'm excited to hear about it.
it's going to be a blast. I can't wait. And I hope I'm going to see a lot of our listeners out there as well. Aaron Shwom, thank you so much. I can definitely think we'll probably get you on again within the next 12 months to tick or to dissect another particular topic but for today in the delivery methods, that was brilliant.
Thank you.